Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for taking the time to join today's webinar in line with Mental Health Awareness Week this week. My name's Mel. I'm the Quality and Process Audit Manager here at Care First, and we're pleased to be joined by our clinical lead, Liam, who's going to talk us through understanding anxiety and tips for us to cope. So if we can just go through some general rules really for the webinar. Everybody is in listen-only mode for this session. If you do have any questions at all that come up throughout the session, please do make a note of those in the questions box on the right-hand panel of your screens, and we will run a Q&A session at the end of today's session. So Liam is going to go over the content for today on anxiety and tips in which we can cope. I'll also give a brief overview just of the Care First service and ways in which you can get that all-important support for both emotional and practical issues during this time, and then we'll go to a live Q&A with both of us at the end of the session. So I'll hand over to Liam. Thank you.
Hello everybody. Hopefully you can all hear me well. So I'll just kind of, before going into the aims, which you can see, but kind of best hopes for today, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Liam Ballock. I'm the Care First clinical lead. My role is to oversee and work with the counselling department, really, to kind of offer them support and direction, and to kind of deal with any cases that may need some additional support. So just going on to the content then, so the best hopes for today, really, or my best hopes for you guys, is to understand what anxiety is, understand what the symptoms may look like of anxiety, understand maybe some of the causes and triggers, and look at kind of things that you can do to cope better with the anxiety that either you or someone that you either manage or work with may be struggling with, and then also just a brief kind of conversation about the best ways that you can maybe support others that may be struggling with anxiety. So that's my best hopes for today, that at the end of this that you'll have a good sense of all of those things, really. So if we go on to kind of understanding what anxiety is, so what is anxiety? So anxiety is, first and foremost, anxiety is not fear. Anxiety and fear are probably the best way to describe them would be kind of first cousins. They're definitely within the same family, but they are very different. In general, fear is seen as a reaction to a specific danger, while anxiety is seen as a kind of unfocused, objectless, future-orientated fear. So fear is anxiety that is attached to a specific thing or circumstance, and in contrast, anxiety doesn't require a triggering stimulus. It's the anticipation of a threat that is feared, and so anxiety can result in becoming kind of chronically vigilant for potential threats. So anxiety and fear, the best way, the simplest way for me to describe it really, is that anxiety is more future or past based. So you can feel anxious about something that has happened in the past. You can feel anxious about something that is going to be happening in the future. Something that is happening in the here and now that is specific and that you can identify as a kind of potential danger or threat is a fear. And so that's the difference. They're very similar, but they are different feelings. So anxiety is not fear. Now I've put caveman days on there. What does that mean? So anxiety really is our body's inbuilt alarm system, and we've had it, us humans have had it from kind of caveman days. So what's important to recognize is that anxiety is normal, and it exists due to a set of bodily functions that have existed in us from our caveman days. So back then, we were equipped with an internal alarm system designed to protect us from the dangers surrounding us in the wild, and this system would make us hyper alert by giving us boosts of adrenaline that would increase the heart rate and boost the amount of oxygen going to our limbs so that we were better able to fight or run from danger. And some of you, I'm sure, will have heard the phrase fight flight. That's kind of where that comes from. So the fight flight response. And some people who maybe experience anxiety will sometimes describe kind of a feeling of butterflies in the stomach. And that feeling is the mechanism that we've just talked about kicking in to our bodies. But instead of being used to avoid immediate danger, like it was back in our caveman days, it's now often wrongly and inappropriately activated kind of during normal everyday situations when stress is built up. And often it can happen unknowingly. It can be a build-up of stresses that we aren't necessarily aware of, but it's happening in the background until eventually you get to a point where you're overwhelmed and kind of can't cope. So that's kind of what anxiety is. And I think, just to say before we kind of move on to the next slide, that that anxiety, I think in some ways has been given a bit of a bad rap, in the sense of, as we've just discussed, anxiety is a normal inbuilt system within our body. It's our body's way of trying to protect us. Unfortunately, it can be really kind of debilitating for a lot of people until they start to understand what their anxiety is rooted in, and therefore they can start to take control of it more. So it's really important to understand that anxiety in some way is actually there trying to help us and trying to protect us. That's what the bodily function is trying to offer us. Okay, so we'll move on to the next slide. So symptoms of anxiety. So some of the ways in which anxiety may show up for you, and I'm sure that if you haven't got one of these, you've maybe got all of them at some point. So feeling tired, on edge, restless or irritable, a sense of dread, being unable to concentrate or make decisions, having trouble sleeping, feeling sick, dizzy, sweaty or short of breath, being shaky or trembling, getting headaches or tummy aches, avoiding situations or putting off doing things you're worried about. And just from, just a bit of my own experience, I think that preparing this presentation, because I knew that there would be a lot of you joining us today, there was a lot of that going on for me in terms of avoiding situations and putting together this presentation. So that's kind of how the anxiety showed up for me that day. Difficulty falling or staying asleep, experiencing kind of a notably strong, fast or irregular heartbeat, having pins and needles, having a dry mouth, sweating excessively, and repeatedly checking things or seeking assurance from others. So those are just some of the ways that anxiety shows itself, some of the symptoms of anxiety. So we'll move on to our next slide, which is about causes and triggers. And I wanted to just highlight I suppose the difference between a cause and a trigger. So a cause is the foundation, the root of the issue, and triggers are things that can happen on an everyday basis that will then trigger the anxiety reaction kind of starting to happen within us. So a couple of causes that I've kind of highlighted are, the first one is from before birth. So if our parents, particularly obviously our mothers, have had a stressful pregnancy, and by that what I don't mean is I don't mean every pregnancy has its stresses, but I'm talking about ongoing relentless stress. What happens is that the mum's levels of cortisol, which is a chemical in the body, is heightened because of the stress that she's experiencing, the ongoing stress, and that cortisol, that chemical, actually gets fed to the growing baby, And so there is a lot of research out there that has linked a stressful pregnancy to being more, I suppose, more prone to general mental health challenges, but anxiety is included in that. So for some people, this is about a chemical imbalance that has come with them from birth. Another cause another main cause really is trauma. It's one of the main causes of anxiety. Ultimately, our past experiences inform how we interpret the here and now. And if we have had experiences of trauma, big or small, it can cause anxiety and panic reactions to situations later in life. There are some situations where if you've experienced a trauma in your life and maybe you can remember smells and colours and things like that, those similar smells or smells that are similar to that, that you can just walk down the street and you can pick up a scent or something, and it may start to trigger something even when you don't know that it is, but it can start to trigger something within you that by the end of the day, you get to the end of the day and you're feeling kind of on edge and clearly kind of in an anxious state. And for a lot of people, it's helpful to be able to kind of track back their day to what actually triggered that reaction for the day. Some other triggers are obviously uncertainty. At the moment, uncertainty surrounds us all not just across the country, but across the globe. And anxiety can be triggered massively by a sense of not feeling in control of what's going on. And we may talk about that a little bit later on. Another trigger may be money, worries about financial strain or financial difficulties, general stress, whether that be work-related stress or stress outside of work. Health issues is a trigger for a lot of people, particularly at the moment with COVID-19. And social situations. A lot of people struggle with social anxiety and being in large groups of people. And some people on the other end of that struggle to be in small groups of people or by themselves. So social situations can be a trigger for people. Okay, so moving on to the next slide. So just some coping strategies, which I'm hoping, I haven't listed a massive amount here, because I think one of the firm beliefs that I have is that that you as an individual know yourself better than I do, and that you know what works for you and what doesn't work for you. And if you're struggling with anxiety but you're managing to cope on a day-to-day, try to highlight those things that you're doing and to keep doing them, to do more of them. I'm sure that lots of you are probably already doing lots of things to help yourself cope and manage with anxiety that you may be struggling with. And it's, my message, I suppose, is definitely continue to do those things because they will keep you going. But think of ways that you can bring back control into your life. For me personally, simple things like organising and tidying my space that I currently work and live in is a massive way that I can start to feel more in control, and that helps to alleviate my anxieties. So simple things like that can have a massive difference. Making lists and then acknowledging things on those lists that you absolutely have no control over, and taking those things off the list and just putting them to the side. It's not about getting rid of them, but just putting them to the side and acknowledging that there's absolutely nothing you can do about that. And then going back to the list with the things left on it that you do have control of, and start to just work through those. So that's about kind of managing your worries, I suppose. Communication is also a way to manage anxiety. Anxiety is often a hidden thing. So for me, being able to say to you today that talking about this subject in front of well, not in front of, but over the internet with upwards of 500 people potentially listening, that's something that's going to trigger me anxiety, and being able to own that brings it out of being hidden and brings it out into the open, and therefore you then start to have more control over it. So being able to just say, in a situation where you're feeling anxious, being able to just acknowledge that and say out loud, you know, I'm acknowledging that I'm kind of starting to feel a bit anxious at the moment. That may kickstart a conversation with people around you who may be also feeling anxious, or maybe aren't, but are there to listen. So communication is key. Physical exercise, we all know the benefits of physical exercise, just in terms of the chemicals that it can create in our brain, and the positive impact that will have on our mood generally. Talked about lists already. Mindfulness and meditation are both things that are massive helps to those that struggle with anxiety, and there are loads of apps out there that can help with that. Deep breathing exercises, which is linked to mindfulness, but there's the kind of the 4-7 breathing exercise, where I'm sure you can look it up online, but kind of breathing in for 4 and then breathing out for 7, and making sure that your breath is coming from your diaphragm, so your stomach, which is where your breath should be coming from. Often when someone is feeling anxious, what you will notice is that your breath, rather than it coming from your stomach, which is where your diaphragm is, you'll notice that it becomes more chest-based breathing, and that's an indication of someone that is struggling to feel calm or is feeling anxious. And then also just keeping a diary, and you know, I've often struggled with this, because to me a diary kind of has always been a written thing, but actually with the technology that we have nowadays, it doesn't have to be a written diary. It can be a video diary, or it can be an audio diary. However you are able to put down, whether that be on paper or on a video or on an audio tape, how you're feeling and how your day has been, what that does is it allows you to let go of some of that that pressure from within you. So rather than holding all of that pressure inside your body, you're able to get it out because you're putting it somewhere. So those are just some of the coping strategies that I'm sure that, you know, you're all doing. So just moving on then to supporting others. So it's really important that you listen and that you resist, if you are supporting others, resist the urge to fix it, because you can't. You know, the amount of times that I've had conversations with friends and kind of shared a difficult experience with them, and the response is always, yeah, I understand that, but have you tried this, or have you tried that? And really that's not what I'm looking for from them. What I'm looking for from them is a listening ear, just someone for me to share my experience with. Because there are lots of situations that unfortunately can't be fixed. You know, we're living in a time right now where we're all having to isolate and keep ourselves safe. That can't be fixed. You know, there isn't an easy fix to that. And so sometimes just being able to have someone to listen to them is really important. So resist the urge to fix it, because a lot of times you can't. Normalize their experience, you know, try to make sure that they understand that it's not them going crazy, and that they're not, you know, they're not necessarily unwell, or that there's, you know, there's not necessarily something wrong with them, but that actually they are experiencing a normal reaction to an extraordinary situation. And that's what anxiety is. They're, you know, they're reacting to something that has happened in their day. And it's a normal reaction. So being able to just listen and normalize, and then encourage them to seek support. And that could be that they keep using you and other friends for that support, or it could be that they need to meet with their GP, or you know, contact Care First for some counselling support, whatever that may be. But encourage them to seek that support. And I haven't noted it here, but a really important additional thing is to then follow up with that person. You know, don't think that because you've had that conversation you can kind of wash your hands of it. definitely follow up and check in with them and see how they're doing and see whether they've done the things that maybe they said that they would in your first conversation, because I think it just shows them, if nothing else, it shows that person that you're genuinely interested in their well-being. Okay, and then moving on to the next slide. So this will be, so hopefully some of the stuff that I've talked about has been helpful, and we're going to obviously be doing a Q&A, so you can send your questions in and I will do my best to answer them, but these last few slides will be Mel that will go through some of these for you, so I'll pass back to Mel at this point.
Okay, thanks so much, Liam, and thank you for running through that content. I think it's really, really valuable and something that many people are going to be able to relate to, particularly at the moment, with such uncertain times upon us. And it is about encouraging people to be more open with how they're feeling. If they are feeling anxious, to talk about it. And as Liam mentioned, that might be confiding in a close friend or family member to say, this is how I'm feeling at the moment, and recognizing that that is okay. But it's also about being able to signpost you to some professional support, in which Care First comes in, to help you get that support that you may need around any kind of emotional or practical issues. So my hope is that you may have at least already heard of Care First, but those of you that haven't, we're professional counselling, information and advice service. We offer support for absolutely any issue, whether that be arising from home or work, and we fully appreciate that those are one and the same thing for many people at the moment. But it's there to, a lot of people will feel that it's a service provided through work and it's just for work problems, but that's really not the case. In an ideal world, we could say leave home at home and leave work at work, but life doesn't work like that. So it's important that we're able to support with absolutely any issue that's causing you a stress or a worry or a bit of anxiety at the moment. The counselling service is available 24/7, 365 days of the year. And when you first speak with Care First, you're speaking with a qualified counsellor that can support you in the moment from that very first call. It's not a case of calling to book in for an appointment. You are speaking with the professionals in the moment. So what they will do is really establish a focus for that first call. Talk about what is it that has prompted you to get some support today? What is it that's going on right now for you? And they'll just establish really what the best way forward is going to be. Now, that might be that you just need to have that one-off call that day and just talk about some of those issues that are causing you a bit of worry, stress or anxiety. Or it might be that they'd say, let's call back again, call back whenever you need some support. Or it might be that they suggest you'd actually benefit from some contracted counselling, and that can either happen over the telephone or via video link at the moment, in which case it can sometimes be face-to-face when things are back up and running. As well as all of the emotional support available to you through the counselling service, you also have access to a team of information specialists who are available 8 AM till 8 PM Monday to Friday. Now that's there because we recognise it's not always the emotional things in people's lives that cause people the most stress, worry or anxiety, but it's the practical things as well that can really build up and make an emotional situation that much more difficult to deal with. Now, sometimes just knowing the answers to some of those practical things can help put us back in control of a situation again, so that they're available between those hours, Monday to Friday. You also have access to a whole host of online resources through the Care First Lifestyle site, and I've featured the link on this page just here. And you can also access online counselling through that facility as well, which is an online chat facility in real time with a counsellor, to be able to help support you with anything that's causing you a stress or a worry. If you're a manager or if you have any leadership responsibilities, you might be needing some hints or tips on how best to manage your teams remotely, how to deal with a difficult conversation, whether it be around bereavement, or it could be to do with disciplinaries, or anything at all that is, you have any doubts around how to approach a situation or how best to engage your teams. Care First can support managers or leaders with any kind of issues around those areas. Now, you may also be questioning just how confidential the service is. So this part really is just to really assure you that anything that you say to Care First stays with Care First. The service is 100% confidential. Your information is never passed on to any third party at all. As you can appreciate, it is with these three really exceptional circumstances, which is the threat to life of another person, child protection and vulnerable adult issues, and the risk to the security of your organisation. And that can be the data or structural risks. So please be assured, if you take anything away away from this content around Care First, that everything that you say stays with us and it is 100% confidential. So I hope that you found today's session useful. Obviously, Liam has been there and been great to be able to cover off issues around anxiety, symptoms to look out for, and ways in which we can help ourselves and support each other. And also you had the content delivered there around how you can best access some support if you need it for any emotional or practical queries. If you do have any questions at all following today's session, please do feel free after the Q&A to send those through to info@care-first.co.uk. But thank you so much for joining today.